So most businesses say that profit rules everything. In reality, though, when you really start to take a look at it, cash flow rules everything. But nonetheless, we have to be profitable, right? So cash flow is good, but we have to be profitable and do it the right way. So today we're going to talk about 4 different ways for you to improve your profits simply through being more efficient, which basically means you get more for doing less. All right, so we're going to jump right into it. And we're going to look at number 1, which is the power of optimizing your processes. So in the military, there's something called a standard operating procedure, or an SOP for short. And the best way it was explained to me by one of my military mentors is that an SOP is a rule or a set of instructions to follow in the absence of leadership. Essentially saying, hey, look, all leadership is gone. What do we do in order to complete the mission? And when we think about that inside of a business, it's kind of the same thing, right? So when a business owner or a CEO is no longer in the picture, they're busy with another meeting, working with another client. What is it that the team members are actually doing? And everything that they should be doing should be leading to completing the mission, completing the service, completing the product, and leading towards profit. So how do we do this? Now, this is worth a whole video within itself. And matter of fact, we do have a form of this video on the channel. But what we're going to talk about here is just the general process of improving operational efficiency. So the first thing that we have to do is we have to look at what the end objective is. So it may be filing taxes, it may be flipping the house, it may be whatever your business model is. What is the end objective? Now, in order to get to that end objective, what are the major steps we need to do to get there? So if it's flipping a house is the end objective, well, the first thing we have to do is we have to find the house, right? We have to underwrite a good deal. Well, then we got to buy the house, and then we have to construct or renovate the house, and then we have to sell the house. Those are 4 major steps within our process. All right, now that we know what is the bare bones, what's needed to get to the end of the process, now we can say what is needed to do those individual steps. So we have 4 major steps in the process, but step 1 of finding the house might actually be underwriting the deal. It might be marketing, so forth and so on. By doing this process, what we've done now is simply said, we know exactly what needs to be done, and we're not wasting our time on any extra activities. So doing that will help you streamline your workflow. Now, here's the secret sauce for the next step. So there's a guy named Naval Ravikant. You may have heard of him. He talks about something called the 4 C's of leverage. What that looks like is content, code, collaboration, and capital. And the idea of this is if we follow that process, content being SOPs, our processes, code being different technology or systems, collaboration being team members are working with people, and capital is throwing money at the problem. But if we follow that process in that exact same sequence, as we're looking at, we've streamlined our workflow. Now, how can we expedite sections of it? And we first look at content. Can we make training videos? Can we make an SOP? So now, no matter what, it's done every time. Code. Is there a CRM that we can bring in, or maybe a calculator that we can build to analyze our flip or analyze our profits per product or per sale? Right. Then collaboration. Now that we have that built out, who's the right team member to fill in that spot? And by doing this process, we streamline it so well that there's no more wasted time. And through efficiency is how we earn more profits. Number 2, not as in-depth, but very important, is just smart sourcing and procurement. And so what does that really mean? There's going to be vendors that we have to go to. So again, in real estate, oftentimes we need contractors. We may need material supplies, whether it's tile or countertops, right? And some other businesses, we also white label services, meaning, for example, hey, I'm a doggy daycare, right? I'll bring the dogs in. However, I don't have a washing facility on staff or in the building. So we're going to hire a dog washer or groomer to come in. We'll charge our clients, and then we'll pay the small fee to the doggy groomer. And that way we've white labeled the services. The clients don't necessarily know that we're using that other vendor, but we're still running it through our operations. So there's many different ways that we can go about procuring our sources, whether straight to the source, white label, so forth and so on. But when we have to think about it from a smart perspective, it's going back to bare bones, to grassroots. Can we negotiate better terms? Can we simply say something along the lines of, this is one's very easy, hey, can we just pay less if I bring you more? right? So if I bring you 50 clients, can we get a bit steeper discount? That's a really common one. That's very simple and straightforward. There's also different types of partnerships or affiliates that you can try to set up as well. But just because you have a really good relationship with one vendor doesn't mean that that should be the only vendor that you're talking to, that you're exploring. So explore other vendors. They might be able to give you the same exact material for maybe cheaper, or they have a good alternative to what you've been using that's more cost effective. And last part on this is, as we receive more items that we need for our service or our products that we deliver, i.e. inventory, we got to be smart about how we manage that inventory. Now, there's a ton of different ways to do it. That within itself is an entire industry of inventory management. But the concept is, how do we make sure that we're not holding on to something too long, so it's not losing its value, it's not deteriorating? If we have holding costs associated with the inventory, how can we get rid of it sooner? Perfect example is flipping a house. When we buy the property, we renovate the property, and we're holding the property. At any time during that stage, there's holding cost associated with that. We still have to pay utilities, we still have to pay taxes, we still have to pay insurance, we still have to typically pay interest on any type of loan that we have against that. So just finding a way for you to go theoretically from a 6-month flip to a 4-month flip can exponentially increase your profits as well. Now, this third one is honestly my favorite. It's pricing strategies. And a lot of times there's not really a lot of thought put behind how you would price something. One of the most common ways is the price plus method or the cost plus method. So basically it's saying, hey, look, in order for me to do this, it costs me $500 to do this, right? To source the material, to pay for the labor, whatever the case is. So I'm going to charge you $500, and then I'm going to add my profit. I'm going to plus up whatever it is that I actually want to make. Now, this one is extremely simple, but we have to understand, in an area or an industry that's highly competitive, doing the cost plus doesn't really give us a competitive edge. Matter of fact, there may be another vendor who can do the same markup. Say the plus, we're going to 500 plus another 20% is what our cost plus model is. Well, if there's another supplier or another producer out there that can do it for cheaper because they can source materials cheaper, or they source the materials themselves, well, then we've kind of priced ourselves out of the competition. Now, although it's super simple, again, it works in industries or in markets where you have access and there's plenty of demand. But as soon as demand tightens up, this model doesn't necessarily give us a competitive edge. So how can we use pricing to give us that competitive edge? Well, a perfect example is something like penetration pricing. And essentially what this is saying is, hey, we're going to bring it in at such a low cost that we're trying to penetrate the market. We want people to understand who we are, recognize the brand, and we want to buy up as much market share as possible. You know, this could also be called guerrilla marketing or guerrilla pricing, where we're essentially trying to come in and just snatch up as much market share by any means necessary. This would work well if what your client base is maybe reoccurring revenue, somebody that you want to stay with you for a long time. So let's go in there, let's grab them up, and maybe their average lifetime value was fairly high. So you know what? Yeah, we're willing to just go out there, mass market grab somebody. They may stay with us for 2 years and we generate X amount of profits. Great, it makes sense. Also, if we think about it from a marketing standpoint, sometimes when we spend our money in marketing, it's, hey, how do we get more deals? Well, every now and then the strategy may change to say, well, how do we get more eyes on our brand? How do we get more brand recognition? And by doing kind of the same concept here, we may look for a way to reach the majority of the audience, right? The majority of the market with as little cost as possible. Now, in reality, there's probably 50 different pricing models out there. Some of them are very similar with small nuances, but there's a lot of ways that we can be strategic. A few others would be bundle pricing, right? A bulk kind of pricing or discounts for there. We could talk about affiliate or referral pricing, essentially saying if you bring us a client, we'll give you a discount or something to that effect. There's many different ways that we can be strategic. And then it's often misunderstood or not pursued as hard as it should be for a lot of small business owners. So strategic pricing can go a very long way. And the last thing we're going to talk about is how do we kind of boost revenue and profitability across all departments, right? So when we think of departments in everything that we do, no matter how simple your business is or how complex it is, there's always different departments, all right? So for example, if we were in the real estate investing space, we would see maybe flipping and then wholesaling and maybe rentals, and the list kind of goes on from there. If you were to look at something like an accounting firm, then you may have bookkeeping, you may have tax preparation, you may have strategy, and things like that. There's different departments. Now, when we think about what corporations do with departments, departments all have a purpose. Sometimes they're meant to be profit centers, meaning that this department is meant to generate a profit for the company, all right? Some of them may be cost or loss centers, where we're saying, hey, we're trying to write off a lot of our expenses through this department. There's a bunch of different other purposes for different departments. But as we look across each one, we have to kind of encapsulate them and allow them to be self-sustaining, right? When we have so much going on as a business owner and we try to put all of them together when we're evaluating our processes and our finances, it causes confusion. It gives us a lack of clarity because we don't know really what's causing us growth or what's causing us pain or loss. So by separating them out by departments, there's a couple things we can do. The first thing we can do is we can start looking at cost reduction. And everybody and their mama since the dawn of time has always said, you can make more money, spend less money. All right, and that's true to a degree, but in reality, we're running a business. We can only reduce our expenses so much. There's always going to be some sort of expense. So yes, we should reduce our expenses as much as we can to where it makes sense. And so by doing that, that's one step, and that's great. By doing it by department allows us to really see, like, do we need this for this specific function? Great. The second thing we can do is look at the income from each department. What is actually bringing in the income? Now, the best part about doing this is because when we evaluate, again, what's the end objective and what's actually bringing in the income, we can start to diversify our revenue streams or our income streams. Okay, I'll give you a great example of one of our clients that came in not too long ago. What they were doing was they were doing flips, a lot of flips. And they had the full system built out. They had a full team of contractors. They were cranking out 80 flips a year. They were really rocking and rolling. The market changed. The market shifted. And so now, again, with flips, you have to put the listing on the market at a competitive market price in order for it to sell. So their old way of pricing and their old way of doing things was actually yielding them less and less and less profits. And it was really affecting their company. So what we were able to do is just look at it as an individual department and realize that what this client had was everything they needed to do renovations and construction. So by exploring this, we were able to now say, hey, look, we're drying up on our inventory. Our inventory is slowing down, but we still have the staff that needs to get paid. Why don't we start doing renovations for others? And by instantly doing that, they were able to create that revenue stream, which was able to produce almost $500,000 within their first 12 months of pursuing that, right? So by identifying each individual department, now we can break it down and say, all right, what tools and resources do we have now to increase our profitability? I know that's a lot kind of jammed into one video, but there's so much more out there as well. If you guys can think of any other ways that you personally try to increase profits, or maybe even something that you read, go ahead and put it in the comments below and let's talk about that as well. But as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.